The rain poured heavily in the heart of downtown New York, streaking the glass towers with blurred reflections of lights. The sidewalks were crowded with people rushing under umbrellas, trying to escape the storm. But under a dimly lit awning, hunched over in ragged clothes, sat a man most passers-by barely noticed. His name was Marcus, a tall black man in his late 40s. His beard had grown wild, and his coat was torn at the sleeves. His shoes barely held together, soles flapping each time he shifted. Most days, people avoided eye contact, as though acknowledging his existence was a burden. To them, Marcus was just another homeless man, another invisible life swallowed by the city. But Marcus wasn't always invisible. Once upon a time, he had stood under bright lights in a concert hall. His fingers had danced across ivory keys, weaving music so powerful it made audiences cry. Back then, he was one of the most promising pianists in the city. But life had a cruel way of striking down dreams. A family tragedy, mounting medical bills, and then addiction had dragged Marcus into a spiral. Eventually, he lost everything: his home, his family, his career. The only thing he hadn't lost was the memory of music. Tonight, however, Marcus wasn't thinking about music. He was thinking about food. His stomach growled, empty after 2 days without a real meal. The rain made begging useless, few people stopped, and even fewer gave. Just then, a sleek black limousine rolled to a stop in front of the luxury hotel across the street. A chauffeur stepped out, holding an umbrella, and opened the rear door. Out came a tall, sharply dressed man in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Marcus had seen in a year. His gold watch gleamed under the city lights, and his shoes clicked confidently against the wet pavement. This man was Richard Holloway, a billionaire real estate mogul who had built half the skyscrapers in the city. Known for his arrogance as much as his wealth, Richard lived in a world where money was the measure of every person's worth. As Richard crossed the street, his eyes landed on Marcus. For a moment, he paused, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Then a smirk tugged at his lips. "Pathetic," Richard muttered, walking closer. "Begging in the rain, wasting your life away." Marcus looked up, weary but polite. "Sir, anything you can spare. Just some food." Richard chuckled, amused by the desperation. "Food? Why should I feed a man who hasn't earned a thing? You people just sit around waiting for handouts." Marcus's chest tightened. He had heard such words before, but they always cut deep. Still, he kept his voice calm. "I didn't choose this life. Things happened." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Things always happen to losers. But tell you what, let's make this interesting." The billionaire glanced at the grand piano sitting in the hotel lobby, visible through the glass doors. It was a Steinway, glossy black, polished to perfection. An idea sparked in Richard's mind, and his smirk widened. "If you can play that piano," Richard said, pointing at it, "I'll feed you. Not just scraps, anything you want from the five-star restaurant inside. But if you can't," he paused, his tone dripping with mockery, "then you prove you're nothing but a lazy beggar." A small crowd had gathered by now, curious about the exchange. Guests inside the hotel turned their heads, watching through the glass. Some chuckled, others shook their heads, but no one intervened. Marcus's heart pounded. His fingers twitched at the thought of touching a piano again after so many years. He hadn't played in ages, his skills might be gone, his hands stiff. Yet deep inside, a fire flickered. Music was still part of him, buried but not dead. "I'll try," Marcus said softly. Richard laughed. "Oh, this will be good. A homeless man entertaining us. Come on, show us what you've got." The chauffeur opened the glass doors, and Richard strutted inside, motioning Marcus to follow. Reluctantly, Marcus stepped into the warmth of the hotel lobby. People whispered, staring at his ragged clothes against the polished marble floors. The Steinway gleamed under golden lights. Marcus approached it slowly, his reflection staring back at him in its flawless surface. His heart raced. He sat on the bench, the familiar creak beneath him sending memories flooding back, audiences, applause, the sound of notes rising into the air like prayer. But now, the audience was different. Some sneered, some pulled out their phones, eager to record what they assumed would be a spectacle of failure. And standing nearby, Richard crossed his arms, confident this would only confirm his low opinion. Marcus placed his trembling hands over the keys. For a second, doubt nearly paralyzed him. Could he still do it? Could he summon music from a soul bruised by years of suffering? Then he closed his eyes. He remembered his mother's voice when she used to sing gospel hymns. He remembered the first time he touched a piano, the way the sound lifted him higher than poverty, higher than pain. And slowly, his fingers pressed down. The first note rang out, clear, rich, and pure. The crowd fell silent. Marcus began to play. The sound that filled the lobby was not what anyone expected. It wasn't clumsy, nor awkward, nor broken. It was alive. The notes flowed like a river, smooth and effortless, cascading through the air with warmth and depth. Marcus's hands, though weathered and scarred, moved with a grace that silenced every whisper. His body swayed as if the music itself pulled him into another world, one beyond hunger, beyond poverty, beyond shame. He played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, a piece that had carried him through his darkest nights when he was young. Each note rose and fell with aching beauty, echoing off the marble walls and glass windows. For the first time in years, Marcus felt whole, like the man he once was. The lobby guests froze in place. Phones lowered. Sneers vanished, replaced by wide eyes and stunned silence. The music wrapped around them like a spell, pulling them into Marcus's world. Even the rain outside seemed to hush, tapping softly against the glass as though it, too, listened. Richard, standing with his arms crossed, tried to hold onto his smirk. But something in his chest stirred. The billionaire had expected noise, a joke, a performance to laugh at. Instead, he felt moved. Against his will, he remembered being a boy, listening to his mother hum a lullaby when they lived in a small, crumbling apartment before money had changed everything. For a moment, Richard wasn't the ruthless tycoon. He was just a man listening to another man bare his soul through music. When Marcus reached the final note, the sound lingered in the air, fading slowly like a sigh. The lobby erupted in applause. People stood, clapping, some even cheering. A few wiped tears from their eyes. Marcus lowered his hands, chest rising and falling with exhaustion. He hadn't played in years, but in that moment, it didn't matter. He had reminded himself, and everyone else, that he was more than his circumstances. Unbelievable, whispered a woman in pearls. That was beautiful. Another guest muttered, he's better than half the performers have paid to see. The applause swelled again, yet Marcus's eyes turned toward Richard. He didn't crave applause, didn't crave admiration. He just wanted to know if the man who mocked him would keep his word. Richard cleared his throat, trying to mask the emotion in his eyes. He forced a chuckle. Well, not bad, for a man off the streets. Not bad, someone in the crowd snapped. That was incredible. Richard raised a hand, quieting the room. His pride battled with something he hadn't felt in years, humility. All right, he said finally, looking at Marcus. A deal's a deal. Let's get you fed. The chauffeur led Marcus into the hotel restaurant, its chandeliers sparkling above crisp white tablecloths. The maitre d', though hesitant at the sight of Marcus's ragged coat, quickly composed himself under Richard's sharp glare. Bring him whatever he wants, Richard ordered. Marcus sat at a table by the window, overwhelmed. He hadn't sat in a real restaurant in years. The smell of roasted meat, fresh bread, and spices was almost intoxicating. His hands trembled as he picked up the menu. Sir, Marcus looked up at Richard. I don't even know what to choose. Richard smirked faintly. Then I'll choose for you. Steak, medium rare, mashed potatoes, and bring a bottle of your best wine. Soon, plates arrived, steaming with food that looked like art. Marcus's stomach growled so loud the waiters chuckled softly. He whispered a prayer of thanks before picking up his fork. Each bite was heaven. The meat melted in his mouth, the potatoes were creamy perfection, and the bread was warm. As he ate, tears pricked his eyes. It wasn't just the food, it was the reminder that he was still human, still deserving of dignity. Richard sat across from him, sipping wine, studying him like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Finally, he leaned back. You're good. Better than good. Where'd you learn to play like that? Marcus swallowed, wiping his mouth. I studied at Juilliard. Had dreams once. Concert halls, tours, everything. But life, he sighed. Life had other plans. Richard's eyes narrowed. Juilliard, you're telling me a man like you, he caught himself, realizing the arrogance in his tone. For once, he didn't finish the thought. Instead, he asked, so what happened? Marcus hesitated. He didn't owe this man his story. Yet something about the moment, something about being seen, made him open up. My wife got sick. Medical bills piled up. I worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep up. Lost her. Lost my son to foster care. Then, I lost myself. Started drinking, couldn't stop. Music slipped away, too. And here I am. The table went quiet. Even Richard's smugness faltered. For the first time, he saw Marcus not as a beggar, not as a man beneath him, but as someone who had carried unbearable weight and still carried music inside him. Richard tapped his fingers against the glass, staring out at the rain. A strange thought came to him, one he almost dismissed. What if, he muttered, turning back. What if you didn't have to be here? What if you had another chance? Marcus blinked. Another chance. Richard leaned forward. You've got talent most people would kill for. And a story people need to hear. Maybe you don't belong on the streets. Maybe you belong back on stage. Marcus's fork froze halfway to his mouth. His heart pounded. Could it be true? Could this mocking billionaire actually mean what he said? Marcus stared at Richard, fork trembling in his hand. The words hung in the air like a dream he was afraid to believe. Another chance. For years, Marcus had lived in shadows, convinced his life had ended long ago. Yet now, here was a man who had mocked him minutes earlier, suddenly offering something more than food, hope. You don't mean that, Marcus said carefully, searching Richard's face for signs of cruelty. People don't just hand out chances. Richard smirked, though his usual arrogance was softer now. I don't hand out anything. But I know talent when I see it. And I know an opportunity when it's staring me in the face. Marcus frowned. Opportunity? For me? Why not? Richard leaned forward. I own theaters, venues. I know producers, managers, donors. With the right push, you could be back on stage in weeks. People would pay to hear a story like yours. Homeless pianist makes a comeback. It's inspiring. It sells. The way he said it, it sells, reminded Marcus that Richard was still a businessman at heart. Yet beneath the calculating tone, there was a strange sincerity. Marcus put down his fork. I'm not a product. I don't want pity applause. I just want to play again. To live with dignity. To be seen as a man, not a stray. Richard's smirk faded. For once, he didn't have a clever response. He only nodded, slowly. Fair enough. Then let's do it for the music. The rehearsal. The next week, Marcus found himself standing in a rehearsal hall, staring at another grand piano. He had been given a shave, a haircut, and clean clothes, simple but dignified. When he touched the keys, his fingers shook at first, rusty after so many years. But every day, his strength returned. Music flowed from him as if it had been waiting in silence, aching to be heard again. Richard visited often, sometimes with investors, sometimes alone. At first, he acted as if this was just business, a gamble on a good story. But as the days passed, he stopped checking his phone during Marcus's playing. He listened, really listened, like a man rediscovering something he had lost. You know, Richard said one evening after rehearsal, my mother loved the piano. She used to tell me music could heal even the coldest hearts. I laughed at her, told her money was the only thing that mattered. He paused, staring at Marcus. Maybe I was wrong. Marcus smiled faintly. Maybe music hasn't given up on you yet. The performance. A month later, the city buzzed with anticipation. Flyers announced, from the streets to the stage, the return of Marcus Hall, pianist. The theater was packed. Reporters filled the aisles, cameras flashed, and whispers rippled through the crowd. Some came for curiosity, some for spectacle, some out of genuine love for music. Backstage, Marcus adjusted his suit nervously. His hands were sweaty, his heart racing. He hadn't played for a real audience in decades. Richard appeared at his side. Nervous, terrified, Marcus admitted. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. Good. It means you care. Now go remind them who you are. When Marcus stepped onto the stage, the lights blinded him for a moment. The audience erupted in applause, though most of them didn't know him yet. Slowly, he sat at the piano, closed his eyes, and let the music speak. He began with Chopin, then drifted into his own composition, one he had written years ago but never performed. The music soared, raw and full of emotion, telling the story of his loss, his suffering, and his rebirth. The theater was silent except for the sound of his playing. People wept openly. When the final note lingered, the audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause, the ovation lasting minutes. Marcus bowed, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in decades, he felt alive. The transformation. In the weeks that followed, Marcus became a sensation. Newspapers hailed him as the homeless virtuoso. Videos of his hotel performance went viral, drawing millions of views worldwide. Concert halls booked him, and donations poured in for homeless shelters inspired by his story. But more than fame, Marcus gained something greater: purpose. He began mentoring young musicians from underprivileged backgrounds, telling them, "You are not your circumstances. You are your gift." Richard, too, changed. Though he never lost his sharp edge in business, those who knew him noticed a difference. He donated millions to music programs in schools. He funded shelters. And though he never admitted it out loud, he began attending Marcus's concerts not as a patron, but as a friend. One evening, after a sold-out performance, Marcus sat with Richard backstage. The billionaire handed him a glass of wine. "You proved me wrong," Richard said quietly. "I thought you were just another beggar. But you were a king without a throne." Marcus chuckled. "And you proved me wrong. I thought you had no soul left. But maybe even billionaires can be healed." They clinked glasses, an unlikely bond forged through the power of music. Epilogue. Years later, when people spoke of Marcus Hall, they didn't talk about the man who once lived on the streets. They talked about the pianist who reminded the world that beauty can rise from brokenness, that music can restore dignity, and that even the most unlikely souls can change. And somewhere in the front row of every performance, Richard Holloway sat, no longer mocking, no longer doubting, only listening, with a heart that had finally learned to feel again.